Vanquish.
Hey, what's up guys? I'm Kyle, back for another video. This time I'm going to be talking about Vanquish, a game published by our good old friends at Sega and developed by Platinum Games, known for their action titles such as Bayonetta and Nier Automata. Now this is actually a collaboration project with director Shinji Mikami, known for his work in Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 4, and more recently with The Evil Within. Now as you can tell from the intro, it might be a little bit different than those previous titles that I just mentioned. Indeed, Vanquish is a much faster paced game than what Shinji Mikami is usually doing in his comfort zone with the horror genre, and it's more akin to Platinum's own brand of action titles. So how well did the Resident Evil veteran do in his first foray into the action genre? So let's talk about the game a little bit. The game is a third-person shooter akin to a contemporary like Uncharted or Gears of War, but it sets itself apart from those titles by offering a couple of unique systems, these being the rocket slide and the bullet time, which can be either manually triggered or automatically activated under the condition that the player sustained too much damage. Now these abilities are under what I call a literal cooldown system, and what this means is that it forces players to monitor a meter of sorts, lest the suit will overheat and you expend your ability to use these abilities. The dynamic of these abilities creates a sort of microcosm instances of resource management in short spurts of combat. Now this enables and encourages reckless aggression, but you can get yourself killed if you're not too careful and overheat in the middle of a battlefield. But in turn it provides an exhilarating sensation of speed and movement that's only just been recently explored in other AAA shooters. I think at its best, Vanquish feels like a sandbox arcade shooter that's really gratifying to play. It really does feel like how a spectacle hack and slash like Bayonetta or Mad World would play in a shooting game form. The game's low skill floor in combination with its easy to understand controls leaves room for a player to improve should they choose to pursue a higher score. But then we get to some of the game's more critical flaws, and let's start by talking about the level design. So this is where the game tends to fall a little bit. Despite being granted abilities that augment your movement options to a disgusting degree, the design of the levels don't seem to have much interest in tailoring an experience that's unique to the game's nature. At its worst, it feels like some levels actually seem to contradict the original design philosophy. A lot of these stages feel very two-dimensional, not literally 2D, but what I mean is that you're generally moving along a flat plane as you progress. There are instances where it seems like the best option is literally to just go cover to cover like any other third-person shooter, which is pretty lame in a game that has a stat that discourages you from staying behind walls. And I think this problem can be rectified by introducing verticality into the mechanics and levels, have players juggle more dimensions during combat than just the ground level, and have a rocket jump, maybe, that uses the suit's meter that would add nuance to how the players can proceed and how developers can design the structure of the level. You can also rectify this problem by having multiple routes in the levels themselves. You could encourage aggressive, out-of-the-cover firefights and active use of the rocket slide to reach faster paths. And if a player fails to meet an objective in time, you can drop them to a slower route. And unfortunately, I think these problems extend to boss fights themselves. While they are very extravagantly designed, the fights themselves also feel a bit flat. There's a definite pattern of dodging attack animations, then pecking the boss with bullets at an obvious weak spot. It doesn't really take advantage of the player's abilities, nor account for them. So some examples of this include, well, there's an early boss fight that has you facing a giant enemy crab robot that shoots rockets at you and has to be crippled for it to expose its weak core. A later battle has you facing two of these things, but instead of making the whole experience different, you sort of just have the same fight 2 times over again, one at a time. And another fight is you literally just shooting at a glorified turret. It's unfortunate that a game with so much character in its mechanical designs that it lacks level designs to compensate for it. Speaking of things that lack character, the characters. Sam Gideon, the main character, is endearing in that 90s action movie one-liner spewing kind of way. But him, Colonel Burns, Elena, and the merry gang of faceless Marines don't really do a good job of making me care about what's happening in the cutscenes. The villain is essentially a retro future Vladimir Putin that makes me laugh more than hate him. The story progresses by having you move along a space colony, activating switches or targeting whatever giant robot happens to be in the way. It stretches the plot of stop this evil villain guy from doing evil villain things for too long and too thin. It is a little confusing and admittedly a little frustrating to understand how a studio with a character repertoire like Platinum played it extremely safe with this game. Well, it's not that confusing. I can take a guess for why it happened. I think Vanquish is trying to emulate the tone and style of actual arcade shooters such as Time Crisis. And if Time Crisis is the standard of story that you're shooting for, then certainly you surpassed it. But then I look at a character like Bayonetta and can't help but think there were a few missed opportunities here. And that's what I think it boils down to. I know I've been pretty harsh in this game in the latter half of this review, but that's because I generally still had a lot of fun with this game and hope that a potential follow-up can fill in some of these missed opportunities. I do encourage anyone who's a fan of the action genre and arcade shooters in general to pick this up on Steam. It's on sale for $7. That's a pretty good deal. It's not much of a monetary investment, neither is a huge time investment. The game's pretty short, and the game runs amazingly at 60 FPS, which trounced anything that the original console release did back in 2010, and the upgraded texture quality doesn't hurt either. The game is still a mechanically strong entry to Platinum's library, and I hope that sales can pick up this time around for an eventual sequel that addresses my problems I had with the levels and the characters. And that's it. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing. If you know anyone else who's into the videos that I'm making, please consider sharing this video. If you're interested in what I'm playing in terms of what is on my plate, what am I looking at next, consider following me on Twitch on twitch.tv/s+, link in the description below. And yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot, guys. See ya.